Hello, Philippines, and welcome to the World News Jam right here on DZRJ and RJ TV. My name is Eric Lecain. Thank you so much for tuning in with us here on Channel 224 Sky Cable and on the radio and on YouTube and on Facebook. We bring you the most interesting stories from around the world, keeping you updated on what's going on outside the borders of the Philippines. Now, this week, we're going to be talking about the comeback of polio. What happened to Brittany, that basketball superstar that was arrested in Russia? Did a little old lady start a war between China and Taiwan? Should lying be against the law? That'd be the story of Alex Jones. Also, some human interest stuff, science, animals, all the biggest news of the week around the world. So let's jump right in. But first, I'm in the Rotary Club here in Makati, and I have to say the Rotary really does some great, wonderful work. One of their big projects is to eradicate the world of polio. In a project with the Gates Foundation, they did work very hard to see if they can get polio out of Africa and Afghanistan and Pakistan. But there's one place that they didn't seem to look, and that's New York City, because this week, the disease that ravaged the world in the 1920s and 30s and 40s, it's back. The New York Health Department has announced that a young adult has contracted the polio virus. The person was an unvaccinated person, which is a major factor, and he has already developed a paralysis in his legs, which, by the way, is a byproduct of the virus. Now, since we are living in, the 21st century, many of you not even know what polio is because we're really in the age of COVID. Actually, there is evidence of polio going back as far as the dynasties in ancient Egypt. When they dug up some of the mummies there for that era, there were signs of deformities in some of the legs, which are the signs of the disease. But it really wasn't until the late 1800s when they really started to see polio as an epidemic in the world. And by the 1940s and 50s, people were becoming more and more terrified as the disease started to saturate everything. But the U.S. had reported 13.6 of the severe cases, which was out of 100,000 people, most of which happened in the summer when the disease spreads, like in swimming pools and movie theaters or places where people are crowded together for long periods of time. Now, even though it's not like COVID, it spreads somewhat in a similar way. People may have polio, never even know it. Most will get flu-like symptoms and get over it, but some may never know they have it because there are little to no symptoms until it happens. Just like COVID, some are very bad. Some have life-threatening reactions. But the worst thing about the disease is that it tends to infect children more than any other person. The most popular or telling sign would be the paralysis of the body. As the paralysis moves through the body, it eventually ends up in the lungs, where it affects the muscles that we use to breathe. And this is when it becomes very dangerous. Back in the day, they put people in something called an iron lung. This was the solution before we had ventilators. It's a large glass metal case. The entire body is covered up except the head. It used pressure to help the lungs move air in and out. They used to put people encased in iron lungs in store windows to help them raise money for care. But that all changed in 1931 when an Australian researcher discovered they were finally able to identify the virus in a lab. Then in 1943, two American doctors figured out that they had a way to grow the virus in a lab. And then by 1954 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, some scientists figured out a vaccine for polio. This vaccine had a drastic effect on the public as the number of cases dropped multiple times over. When a new vaccine was developed that was taken in the mouth instead of given a shot, that became the main vaccine. This became the main source of vaccines spread all over the world. By the 1970s, the cases in the U.S. had gotten to no more than 12 cases per year. But still, globally, very few children were getting immunized, especially in tropical countries. Now, in a survey, it was found that 5 to 9 out of 1,000 had signs of polio in their body. That's when the World Health Organization started to campaign to immunize the world, which was very successful. In many countries, there were no longer any signs of polio after they did this. Now, since there have been small pockets of cases, there had been believed that the virus had completely been removed from the earth. That's what we've always thought, but somehow life finds a way, and now polio is finding its way back into the media to shock and scare us. The U.S. had basically eradicated polio for the last 40 years. So how on earth could polio be back now? One of the biggest reasons are conspiracy theories. People believing in the idea that somehow vaccines for children are bad for them. Vaccines are the sole reason why we don't have worldwide epidemics anymore, like smallpox or polio. Yes, we live in the age of the crazy and ridiculous now. The anti-vax movement is bigger than ever, even though we just went through a pandemic where we had a vaccine and people died because they didn't take it. The man who has polio in New York was not vaccinated, and they have discovered traces of the polio virus in 3 different sewage plants, giving officials reason to believe that maybe hundreds of people may currently be carrying the disease polio. And since New York is one of the largest hubs to the world, the spread of this outbreak could already have moved to other countries. There's already been samples taken from sewage treatment plants in the UK and Israel, and those samples are genetically connected to the same one they found in the New York case. Since polio cannot be spotted right away and can live in the body for weeks or even months before showing any signs, it could potentially already be in hundreds of people around the world. So even though there is a worldwide effort to rid the world of the horrid disease that affects children and can leave permanent afflictions, including leaving one paralyzed, it's still here. Just like COVID or the monkeypox, it's not going away, maybe ever. However, we can become immune to the effects if we just take vaccines. You know, speaking of monkeypox, the state of Illinois in the United States, in a daycare center, a person tested positive for monkeypox. Turns out this is the 3rd case of monkeypox in that single county. Now, they've screened all the children there. So far, the children, nobody else has tested positive. But this monkeypox is quickly becoming more than just a passing news story. The Biden administration has formally declared monkeypox a national emergency. The Department of Health and Human Services had declared this is serious, and the U.S. needs to start taking this very seriously. Currently, there are 6,600 Americans who have contracted monkeypox. Now, in a country of 330 million, that doesn't seem very high, but when you factor in the chance that there could actually be tens of thousands of those who have it, but they have not been tested, well, then the emergency starts to seem really real. Right now, the disease has hit 70 countries. Now, as I have said before, monkeypox is not so much like COVID in that it is spread skin to skin or sharing something that's been touched by an infected person, not breathing on them. New York State itself has declared a state of emergency because they already have 1,200 people that are known to be infected in just New York City. And also, have we said before, it is disproportionately affecting the gay community there. Now, monkeypox is not as deadly as COVID, but people are thinking that this whole thing might be a bit overkill with all these national emergencies being told to people, getting people all crazy. But, you know, if you remember, we didn't think COVID was all that bad at first until all the Chinese started dropping dead. And as we learn, as we try to kill the viruses, you know, they turned out finding new ways to live. monkeypox could be mutating right now as we speak. So today it may just give you an ugly rash, but tomorrow, well, who knows? It could become one of the deadliest diseases known to man. So here we are now working our way through 2022, and we have COVID and polio and monkeypox to deal with. I guess sometimes you have to wonder, what the heck did we do to deserve this? So we figure out that we keep coming up with these scary pictures of multiple viruses plaguing us. Just wish the next virus would, I don't know, look like a teddy bear holding a heart. Just something less scary than what we have now. This is Lecain here on the World News Jam on DZRJ and RJTV. Thank you so much for joining us. Okay, so you know how we have been talking about this female basketball player named Brittany Griner? She was the WNBA star who has 2 gold medals and multiple championships and is freakishly tall and is black and is gay and was arrested for having 2 e-cigarette cartridges in her luggage as she entered Russia, which had tiny amounts of cannabis oil. Now, let me just reiterate, the amount of cannabis oil in her luggage was less than 1/3 of an ounce. Something that is not illegal. Most places, just Russia. Now, ordinarily this would get you in just some trouble in Russia, but there's a ways around it, and such a small amount. However, there's a big difference between Brittany Griner and you. She's a superstar. She is a U.S. citizen, and that has a lot of meaning. It's almost as if the actual crime is a small part of the story. The big part is that the Russians were able to catch a famous American in Russia, and they got her red-handed. So, as we discussed before, she has been in detention for this crime since February. Recently, she had her day in court. In the courtroom, she pleaded guilty because it was hard not to, but explained that she was packing really fast, didn't realize that the cartridges were in there and that tiny amount of cannabis oil was accidentally stuck in her luggage. In other words, she was not attempting to break the law. It was just an accident. Now, I'm sure that drug dealers with a brick of cocaine strapped to their leg would have the same story, but in this case, most people tend to believe her. I mean, why would one of the greatest female basketball players on the planet, who's about to make a small fortune playing in Russia, also have a side job as a drug dealer? Doesn't make much sense, does it? That's why most people believe her. But the judge found her guilty anyway. This week, they read the sentence to fit her crime. So for the most part, if someone is caught doing this in Russia, it usually comes with a couple of months, a year, maybe 2 years. But Brittany Griner was sentenced to 9 years. In a country with one of the worst human rights records in the world, they are giving this person 9 years in a penal colony. When you hear the words penal colony anymore, it's like in a movie with Chuck Norris where he goes to rescue Americans from the penal colony. I mean, it sounds really bad. But worst is the amount of time. 9 years. She's 31 years old, at the top of her game. This sentence for sure will end her career and could possibly end her life. I mean, she's near a 7-foot woman. I wouldn't take the idea out of her being a target in prison. And the issues that we have heard from others about the health problems that you face in places like that, like tuberculosis. But in any case, it seems obvious that this sentence has little to do with the crime itself. The judge stated that it was his view that she came into Russia to commit a crime and that it was purposefully done. Like I said before, if you bring in drugs to purposefully commit a crime, wouldn't you bring in something other than 2 vaping cartridges. It seemed as if the judge did not even consider anything that she said in her statement and gave her the near maximum sentence. So right now, there's a 10-day window to appeal the conviction. However, most experts believe that it will have very little to no effect. I'm sure they're going to play up the statements that she made in which she said that, she pled guilty but had no intention of breaking the law. Of course, this very small amount that was found on her, and the fact that the cannabis that she had was medically prescribed to her because of the multiple injuries she had sustained throughout years and years of professional sports. However, no one believes that her appeal will be very successful. The Russians have a golden goose, and they're not about to let it go on some obvious appeal. So she has already done 6 months behind the bars, so she's about to do 8.5 years. Many people have come out in support of Brittany, begging President Biden to do something to get her back home. 1,100 different female black leaders have called on the administration to find a way to deal with this. Now, supposedly, a trade or prisoner swap has already been offered by the U.S. They want to trade one of the most ruthless arms dealers in the world, whose nickname is the Merchant of Death. That would be in exchange for Brittany. That guy is currently serving 25-year sentence for conspiring to kill U.S. citizens, providing arms to terrorist organizations. But the Russians have said that no deals will be made until all the court proceedings are finished. At the ESPY Awards, many are speaking against the imprisonment of Brittany, calling her a political prisoner. Justin Bieber has offered to help her out of prison, though I'm not really sure what exactly Justin Bieber can do. There are multiple tags such as Bring Brittany Home and Free Brittany. Of course, many in the U.S. are using this as a chance to create a public statement saying that, if Trump were president, then Brittany would already be home. Hey, I don't doubt that, because as we know, Trump and Putin were best buddies. However, I think Trump would have to name 2 rooms in his hotel in Russia after Putin. I don't know. And of course, on the other side, people are saying that if Trump were involved, they probably would never let her go. Anyway, but who cares about that? The fact remains that now sports figures are a target for being used as political pawns. As we thought that maybe the earth was on the right track for peace, that we realized that we were wrong. We see the earth in some ways getting more and more moving toward war. Of course, being a single world economy and a world power, things that we really had hoped were going to happen. We thought that maybe Europe was going to be an example for the rest of the world, and that maybe Asia might have a similar setup to the EU. But in the last 5 to 6 years, the world seems to have lost its way again, as the world continues to distrust its neighbors and use any chance it can think of to get an edge over anyone else. When nuclear bombs were a thing of the past, all of a sudden it's a real threat again. And as we thought that the world wars were over, now we hear the possibility of war on TV every single night. Which brings me to our next story here on the World News Jam on DZRJ, about a fragile little old woman who wears a lot of makeup. Reminds me much of my English teacher in the 3rd grade. That one that used to smack me on the hand with a ruler. But this little old lady is not a school teacher. No, she is the head of the ruling party in the U.S. House of Representatives, and her name is Nancy Pelosi. Now, we have discussed Nancy many times here on the show. She was a master of outsmarting President Trump time and time again. She seemed to trick him at every turn. If it wasn't the border wall, then it was the Affordable Care Act. Thought the Trump presidency, she was digging holes, and old Trump would just step right in them. She was pegged as a hero, while some thought of her as an evil sorceress that should be at least burned at the stake. If you remember, during our discussions about the January 6th hearing, the Trump supporters that stormed the Capitol had plans of killing Nancy Pelosi. But she survived, as she always does, and has continued to be the Speaker of the House of Representatives. But lately, Nancy's been in the news for an altogether other reason. She went to Taiwan. Now, taking a vacation to Taiwan is not really that big of a deal. The problem is, she's the Speaker of the House, number 2 in line to the presidency. And she went to Taiwan to visit its president. It's like if, she had come to the Philippines and visited Lenny Robredo the whole time. I mean, that would be a little weird, right? Almost a kind of a slap in the face to the current president. So, it seems China has that same way of thinking. Nancy waltzed right into Taiwan, totally passing China, which is a bit unnerving to China because if you watched the show here a couple of weeks ago, China looks at Taiwan as another province of China, not an independent country. So here comes Pelosi visiting Taiwan without really asking permission from China. And as you remember, on the show a few weeks ago, we were talking about Biden and his comments about defending Taiwan at any Chinese aggression that might happen. This didn't set so well with the Chinese, and this Pelosi trip seems to be the final straw for China. Since Pelosi's visit with the president and her speech saying that the U.S. will continue to support democracy rather than autocracy, China has cut off all talks with the U.S. in regards to military matters and issues of climate change. China also decided to run some military exercises in that little strip of water running between China and Taiwan. This involves shooting missiles into the sea and flying over Taiwan airspace. They've been having more exercises in the water completely surrounding Taiwan to show them how mad this has made them. Now, the U.S. continues to state that it believes that Taiwan is still a part of China, but what you say and sometimes what you do are not always on the same path. Meanwhile, Taiwan's military is on high alert, and fishermen have been held back from taking their boats out in the ocean. The Chinese have made several statements on this matter, one saying that the Pelosi mission of support of the democracy of Taiwan has had a severe impact on the political foundation of China-U.S. relations. It has seriously infringed on China's sovereignty and territorial integrity and undermines peace and stability across the Taiwan Straits. Okay, this is expected that China will do a lot of blah, blah, blah right now, but even so, what's this going to do in the long-term relationship with the U.S.? There's no question that China and the U.S. need each other, and the U.S. would much rather China be semi-friends with them than be close friends with Russia, which does make the timing of the Speaker Pelosi's visit a bit odd as far as timing goes. I mean, okay, I understand the meaning of the visit. However, the problem is the timing. We on the show have talked about how close China is to making a play for Taiwan. They have stated as recently as this year that Taiwan is a part of China, even though they let them do their little democracy thing, but eventually that will have to end. And if China needs to end it by force, so be it. It's almost seemed like this trip of Pelosi was a dare, making sure that the U.S. says loudly and publicly that any aggression against Taiwan would be war with the United States. Many believe that what is going to happen first is similar to what happened with the Philippines, even India, that China will visit the area in the ocean and that, they will just never leave. They will build a stronghold somewhere in the Taiwan Strait and then just, we're here. So now you're the one that have to make us leave. This will then force Taiwan's hand. And when the stability in the region, it may just go up in smoke. I mean, these exercises that China is running right now, they don't even seem like exercises. They are more like a practice for an invasion. Not sure if you remember, but Russia said it was just doing military exercises when it started an all-out war. China has always been mad every time Taiwan has any kind of meeting with any government. But this hit a nerve. Some type of thing that we have not seen before from China. I mean, China has canceled all meetings with the U.S. Defense Department, along with talks that it had scheduled on maritime safety, and also the return of illegal aliens, the transnational crime, illegal drugs, climate change. All of this now has been canceled. Also, along with the 100 warplanes and the 10 warships that China has sent out to make the Taiwanese nervous, they've also sanctioned Speaker Pelosi and her family. This sort of meant kind of for the people of China. There's kind of a new level of support to retake Taiwan among the people of China, who seem overwhelmingly to want China to bring back Taiwan as part of the country. During interviews with Chinese, both young and old, they believe that Taiwan needs to forcibly be retaken. In the high schools right now, it is taught that Taiwan belongs to China and that the war, the civil war, is not over. No one has actually surrendered. And that it's China's business and only China's business as how they are going to deal with their provinces. But of course, Taiwan has a different perspective on this, and as they are, not going to allow Chinese rule over them ever. They are not Hong Kong. They are not the Philippines. Who said during the last administration they can't go to war with China because they would easily be defeated. Taiwan has been building up its military for decades, waiting for this moment. They're not going to be easy for China to take back. The U.S. has been delivering weapons to them for quite a while now, and even though that China has a massive navy, it won't be that easy to take back Taiwan by force. You can recall that it wasn't that easy for Russia to take back the Ukraine because of all the weapons that have been given to him. But if you stand from the situation and take a look, let's say from outer space, we have to ask the question, who is right here? Should we be fighting over these ideologies? What's good for some might not be the right answer for others, if you know what I mean. The United States believes that its way of life is the way it should be. They don't believe in authoritarian leaderships that rule over people with life and death, that no man should be king, but the people should be able to decide their fate for themselves. That we know what is culturally good for you, and we will support you if you believe what we believe, even if it means you might have to go to war. We saw what one relatively small war has done to the world there in Ukraine, what has done to the economy, to inflation, to the price of energy. But if the U.S. pushes too many of the wrong buttons and this conflict escalates to what would be a war in Asia, what will that do? Taiwan holds the market on microchip supplies, so if they went to war, what would happen to that? The question we ask is, what would the price of an iPhone be if China went to war with a U.S.-backed Taiwan? The U.S. doesn't even have an agreement to fight alongside Taiwan. Their official policy is that China is one country. But actions truly do speak louder than words. And if someone accidentally sinks one of those fishing boats, I fear that all those actions and words, well, they might just turn into war. This is Eric Lecain here on the World News Jam on DZRJ and RJTV. Thank you so much for joining us today. In a related story, the U.S. Secretary of State assured the Philippines that the United States would come to the rescue if at any point they were attacked in the South China Sea. That was yesterday. Of course, this has to do with the U.S. Defense Treaty, that it is still a bit of a concern on whether it will continue under the new administration in the Philippines. But according to the Secretary of State in the U.S., the treaty is ironclad, and the U.S. will help protect the Philippines at all costs. He said the Philippines is an irreplaceable friend, partner, and ally to the United States. The Secretary of State is the highest-ranking official to visit the Philippines since the new administration took power, which is going to be a bit of a test for them to find a middle ground between continuing relations with its longtime ally, the U.S., and the close relationship set up by the past president with China. As we all remember, the relationship with the U.S. seemed to be somewhat unbalanced during the Duterte administration due to mostly the criticisms of his administration over the anti-drug campaign and the following threats by Duterte to cut ties with the U.S., move closer to China. However, even with those threats, in the end, Duterte chose to continue the cooperation with the U.S. military. Currently, everything seems calm as far as U.S.-Philippine relations and China-Philippine relations. However, if this tension with Taiwan continues and eventually moves to the next level, on what side will the Philippines fall? With their longtime ally, the Philippines, or with the new partners, China? Philippines currently is sitting on some debt with China, which might in some ways complicate these matters. But it will be even more complicated if the Philippines is put in the position of having to choose between the China and the U.S. And worst, if they have to choose, thus making an enemy of the other. And how would that play out in the future of the Philippines? And how would others in the region fall in line if a battle were to ensue between Taiwan and China and, of course, the United States being in the middle? In a worst-case scenario, lines would be drawn, borders would be taped off, even the possibility of changes in visa policies, trade, airspace. I know it's a lot of drama, but the fear of some of the predictions that are starting to come true. We know that there is a bit of tension between the new president and the past court cases in the U.S., and China seems to be the lesser of two evils for him. But, of course, in the end, everyone wants what's best for the Philippines, which by all intents and purposes, Philippines is a peaceful nation. It does not invite enemies. It does not invite war. But coming soon, they may be thrust into a situation in which they will have to choose a team. How we all long for the day where that never happens. This is Eric Lecain here on the World News Jam on DZRJ and RJTV. Thank you so much for joining us here on Sunday evening. We're telling the biggest stories that are going on in the world right now. All right, so we all lie. There's no denying it. We lie. It's human nature. Starting when you're a child and you accidentally shoot a bow and arrow into your dad's car tire. You do it when you're in school, when you ask if you really wrote that report or did your parents write it. And then later in life, when your coworker asks if you ate his turkey sandwich. We lie. At some point in our lives, we all do. But some lies are worse than others. Some lies hurt people. And sometimes those lies will cost you. This week, someone asked me, who is Alex Jones anyway? I keep seeing him all the time in the news. Well, to tell you the truth, Alex Jones is one of those liars. He was a liar, but not like, I guess, you and me. He told his lies through a giant megaphone that reached millions and millions of people. He is a conservative radio talk show host there in the United States. It's one of those mediums in the U.S. that has gotten an enormous amount of listeners. It's for people that want to hear that the government, all that they are doing is lying to us. And Alex Jones is the only one that's telling us the real truth about our government. So, okay, it's free speech. You can say whatever you want, right? Well, it turns out, not exactly. Some of his most interesting lies are like the 9/11 attacks. They were all an inside job. He claimed that the Bush administration manufactured this whole story, that the government staged the whole thing. He said that it was a 98% chance that it was all a government plan. He said that the Oklahoma bombing was all put together by the Clinton administration to help his falling polling numbers. That the Boston Marathon bombing, where they bombed the Boston Marathon, that was all staged by the FBI. That the shooting of Congresswoman Gabby Giffords was a government mind control operation. He is the absolute king of conspiracy theories. And his show, InfoWars, is insanely popular. Supposedly, it rakes in, from the show, $800,000 a day. And his net worth is in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Basically, he makes millions of dollars telling lies. But sometimes those lies can get you into trouble, because promoting numerous Donald Trump lies, as well as the COVID lies, and thus losing his ability to broadcast on social media, he's also peddled a lie about the Sandy Hook massacre. That's when a 20-year-old white man walked into an elementary school and killed 26 people, including children between the ages of 6 and 7 years old. It was one of the single worst mass shootings in U.S. history. But Alex Jones said it never really happened, that the whole thing was staged in order to make laws, to take people's rights of owning guns away from them. This whole story was made up by a shadowy group in the government. They want to start a civil war. He claimed that the grieving parents of the dead children were actually paid actors to sway public opinion. It went to the point where so many people started saying that maybe this whole thing was staged by the government, and that maybe none of these children were really dead. But that was not true, was it? All of those children really did die, and none of it was staged. But that was not before Alex had gotten so many people to believe that it was all fake. Well, the parents did not think very much of his conspiracy theories, so they sued him. And I mean, they really sued him to the tune of $150 million. And that was just one case. They said the parents sued him. It was $75 million for damaging their reputation and $75 million for emotional distress. The lawyer for the couple said the suit had many meetings. Every dollar in the suit represents 1 in 4 Americans that actually believe what Alex Jones is saying. Now, Jones is fairly used to these kind of suits. In a total, he has actually been sued 9 times for the same issue. And he doesn't win. Earlier this week, he was ordered to pay the couple $4.1 million in compensatory damages, which Jones turned right around and said that it was a victory for him because it wasn't that much. But even Alex wasn't prepared for what came next. At the end of this past week, the judge finally revealed the amount of punitive damages, $45.2 million. Now, that's going to sting a bit, even for Alex Jones. Now, just to be clear, compensatory damages are for money that you lost or for medical or injury, but punitive damages are for how much you would get for being hurt mentally, how much the egregious conduct of the defendant is worth. And in this case, it's worth $45 million. The lawyers for the families asked the jurors to award them a number that was so high that it would put Alex Jones and InfoWars out of business. He said, "We need to stop this man from ever doing this again." Now, of course, Jones depleted most of his accounts before the trial. The lawyer said that they have records of him removing, $62 million from his account. So they're going to have to find it, but they'll find it somewhere. Jones said that right now he's only worth about $5 million, but no one believes that, mostly no one in the court. And he was caught red-handed lying in the court. Somehow his lawyers accidentally sent all of Jones's text messages to the lawyers of the other side. I mean, all the text messages he had sent over the past years, including ones to Donald Trump, which now have been turned over to the U.S. Justice Department and the January 6th committee. The funny thing is that Jones had no idea, and they sprung it on him in the middle of the closing moments of the court. He was in shock. All his lies were out there, open for everyone, including the jury to see. Now, Jones still contends that he has the right to free speech, and this is a detriment to his First Amendment rights. However, neither the jury nor the judge saw it that way. In fact, at one point in the trial, the judge said, "This is not your show." At one point, Jones finally admitted that the Sandy Hook massacre was real, but that he still had the right to lie about it. So I guess that's the question, isn't it? Free speech. How much rights do we have to lie? I mean, I guess there's a difference, right? If I stand out in the street and I yell, "COVID is not real," versus if I say, have 4 million listeners on my show and I say, "COVID is not real." Is one lie worse than the other? How many people would I hurt standing on the corner yelling at the top of my lungs versus sitting in the air conditioning on a microphone, changing the minds of millions of people and at the same time making $800,000 a day? This is also a question for politicians, isn't it? If one lies and he knows he's lying and he is hurting people by that lie, is he responsible for that? Sure, politicians lie and stretch the truth all the time. But what if it was in the same vein as what Alex Jones did? What if so many of the lawsuits happen to broadcasters and politicians? If they did that, would they be afraid to lie because they're going to get sued? We all lie at some point. But when is a lie worth $45 million? This could be very interesting going forward in the new world that is hard to tell what's real and what's a lie. I guess we will see. This is Eric Lecain here on the World News Jam on DZRJ and RJTV. Speaking of big money, one of the big things that happened last week was that someone won $1.3 billion in the Mega Millions lottery jackpot in the U.S. Can you imagine $1.3 billion in a lottery? But here's the funny thing. We still don't know who it is, and we may never know. There are some states in the U.S. that don't allow the winner. They can stay anonymous. They don't have to ever tell us. I mean, it may be pretty hard to keep that a secret if you had $1.3 billion. I mean, if you're a grab car driver and one day you show up in a new Lamborghini, people are going to say, "Hey." But as of now, as far as I know, there is a winning ticket, but no one has come forward to claim the $1 billion. I mean, I wonder if the person, if they knew they won, but then they couldn't find the ticket. Also, the place that sold the winning ticket is going to get a cool $500,000, and over 390,000 people won something in the lottery. You know, if you get at least 4 numbers right, you're going to win something. And some of those prizes were big. In a related story, I have to say this, an aunt and her nephew, they got into a nasty court battle over just a lottery ticket. It seems that she sent her nephew out to buy the ticket, and then she won. But then the nephew claimed, well, he bought the ticket, so they should split it, right? However, she said she never planned to split the winnings with him if she had won. So now, we're not talking about billions. They actually won $1.2 million. Anyway, after a bitter court battle with lots of money spent from both sides, the judge split it. Sometimes money just changes people, doesn't it? Even family members. Instead of being overjoyed from winning the lottery, an aunt and the nephew will, I don't know, probably never speak again. Just remember, money isn't everything. Although winning $1 billion for sure would be nice. Lately, the lottery jackpots have been going through the roof. Someone won $700 million, then there was another person who won $800 million, and now there's a $1.3 billion winner. There are groups out there condemning these massive lotteries because of the types of people who play them. It's mostly poor people, the people that really can't afford to play. They make a small amount of money and then they blow it all on lottery tickets. I remember one time I had a contractor down there in Cebu, and When he got the money for payment, he went immediately to the lottery booth and spent it all. His workers were all sitting out there waiting to get paid. He'd already spent the money. And of course, he never won. In the U.S. right now, many players in the lottery are people that are on government assistance programs. The irony is that the proceeds from the lottery go to fund government programs for the poor, who then go and spend their money on the lottery. Some have even suggested that you must register before playing the lottery and show that you have enough money to be able to play the lottery. I mean, your chances of winning the lottery are, in a $1 billion lottery, was, I don't know, something like the same as being struck by lightning while being attacked by a shark during a meteor shower. Basically, almost impossible. But still, people who should be buying milk for their babies and paying their workers are blowing it all on the lottery. I know I used to play the lottery all the time. I think one time I got 2 numbers right once. Eventually, I'm like, candy bar or lottery ticket. At least with the candy, I'm sure to be happy. This is Lecain on the World News Jam. So life is moving faster and faster, isn't it? So much we do, so little time to do it. With this phone, we have for this stuff, and we have that phone for that stuff. Got my iPad, got my laptop, got my online computer. But still, just doesn't seem to me enough hours in the day, does there? Well, that may be a problem because the Earth is getting faster and faster. In fact, on July 29th of this year, we had the fastest day ever recorded. Now, our days are 24 hours, 86,400 seconds. But in recent years, the Earth's rotation has accelerated and thus shortening some of the days. In fact, 2021 was a faster year than was 2020. Why is this? Could it be climate change? I know it's so much fun to blame everything on climate change, but it could be blame on the rising of the tides in the ocean, which we'll talk about in a second. So what are we going to do if the Earth spins faster? Won't that throw off the clocks eventually? According to scientists, the answer is yes. At some point, we may need to change the Earth's atomic clock. Every 4 years, we have a leap year, right? An extra day is added to the calendar year. Same will happen with clocks. Scientists have proposed a negative leap second. So every year, we would lose 1 second. Seems simple enough, and who's going to even notice a second disappearing? However, this could have major global effects in the tech industry. Currently, there is a push from engineers in the tech world not to introduce leap seconds into the atomic clock. They have run several simulations of trying this idea of a leap second, and according to them, it could have devastating effects in the computer world, such as unpredictable and outages across the world based on time schedules. They believe that introducing a new leap second is a risky practice that does more harm than good, and they believe it's time to introduce new technologies, not this, to replace it. They are saying that a time jump will cause programs to crash and so forth, but a time reverse, well, that could be way, way worse than a time forward. Besides, all of this, some scientists studying it believe that the polar ice caps are the reason for the Earth that is spinning so much faster now. As I said, it's related to the tides, thus related to climate change. The idea is the Earth's atoms contribute to the momentum of the Earth's angular velocity based on the distance to the rotation axes of the Earth. So once the atoms are removed around the angular velocity, it will vary. In case you didn't get that, the example the scientists give, it's like a figure skater who's spinning around very fast. As they spread out their arms, notice that the spinning slows down, but then they bring their arms inward and their body speeds up. Same as what is happening to the polar ice caps. As the temperature rising on the Earth, it's like the arms pulling in and thus increases the angular velocity. So if you felt like life was passing you by, you may be correct. It's actually going to be fast, although it might just be a second per year. I don't know if I would even notice that. So, we talk about the state of Florida here on the show a lot, I know. There's always something wacky going on in the state of Florida. And if it's not some weird COVID rule, then it's some crazy political issue or just someone doing something crazy. But these days, Florida has a problem. And that problem is snakes. Most correctly, Burmese pythons. Now, there's not supposed to be Burmese pythons living and breeding in Florida. So they're not supposed to be there. But there are, and there are a lot of them. It's gotten to the point where they are everywhere. The problem being that they are getting into people's homes. They are putting dogs and cats at risks. And supposedly they are eating the alligators there. Is that a bad thing? Like I said, this is Florida, where crazy things happen. So, since 2017, they have removed something like, get this, 10,000 pythons in what's called the Python Elimination Program, which they just have professional snake catchers go out and hunt the pythons. But it's not enough. There's just too many of them, and they are breeding too fast. So they're going to do what you would expect from Florida. They're having a contest. Who can catch the most Burmese pythons? So all you have to do is pay $25 registration, take an online class that teaches you the difference between a python and a regular snake, and then you're set. You're ready, set, go. How many snakes can you catch in a week and possibly get a cash prize of $2,500? And there's multiple categories, including most caught snake, longest snake, heaviest snake. Some people are having fun. However, there are some professional snake hunters that are coming into Florida just for this contest. One of these hunters, who's actually a woman, calls herself the Python Huntress. She does snake hunting for a living. She's been working in Florida hunting snakes and will take part in this contest. She, in real life, gets $13 an hour for hunting pythons and gets a bonus for every snake that she catches, $50 for the first 4 feet and $25 for each additional foot. She once caught a 17-foot, 3-inch snake that weighed 110 pounds. Also in the competition will be the defending champion, who last year caught 33 snakes, including a 16-foot snake. He says there's a bit of luck involved and being at the right place at the right time, so it's anybody's game. He's got equipment, including geo-trackers and four-wheelers and swamp buggies and monster trucks. Now, that woman that I was talking about before, she said this is not for everyone. Sounds like a lot of fun until you get bit. These snakes are not venomous. However, it hurts a lot when you get bit. She says once she kills a snake, she will take the skin and use it to make Apple Watch bands. I did say this is Florida, right? They say that this is not about the trophy or the money. It's about helping the environment. These snakes are not supposed to be in this part of the world, so they need to be removed because of the problem they cause to other animals and the environment. In fact, they are worried that some of these species in Florida will be wiped out because of this python problem. So, if you're into snake hunting and you don't mind Florida, here's something for you to do. You can go out and hunt and kill snakes. Now, they could just help out with all the political snakes there. We'd have something going. This is Eric Lecain here on the World News Jam on DZRJ and RJ TV. Thank you so much for spending your Sunday evening with us, and we will see you sometime next week. So thank you again. This is Eric Lecain here on the World News Jam on DZRJ and RJ TV. Everybody be safe out there, and we will see you next week.